Welcome to another edition of the Here We Go podcast. I'm your host, Trent Ging. Today we are going to be looking at the defensive line group. We are finally switching over to the defense. And this is a group that I decided to talk about first because I don't think they're getting enough attention. It's a group that has a lot of unknowns and honestly, a lot of needs. I know we're going to go into the season with Cam Hayward being basically the backbone of that. You're going to see a passing of the torch to a guy like Keanu Benton. And the third starter likely is going to end up being Larry Ogunjobi. Now, I Cam Hayward has been an extremely hot topic because of the contract extension conversation that's been going on. Is he worth it? He's 35. You know, he had a bad year last year. He didn't perform. He's slowing down. He's washed up. Um, has anybody checked his numbers from 2022 and then taken into account the guy had a groin injury for an entire season, came back early, and still was one of our best defensive linemen. Everyone's praising Keanu Benton, but Cam still played better. He just didn't put up his normal Cam Hayward type of numbers. The run defense drastically improved when he got back on the field. It was like 0.7 yards a carry less with Cam Hayward back on the field. That's how much of a difference one guy made to this defensive line last year. I think people are selling Cam Hayward short. I do not think Father Time has anything to do with his production last year. A groin injury for any position is going to be one of the hardest injuries to recover from because it's going to keep lingering all season. There's nothing you can do. You just have to quit playing and let it heal on its own. But when you push the timetable the way that Cam did, and I understand why he did it, we needed him. And he proved that we needed him by coming back and seeing the defensive numbers improve. So he did. He pushed himself back too early. I think he still had, some projections saying he could have been out another 2 weeks with that injury. He didn't want to do that. He pushed through. He worked with his doctors. He did get cleared. And as soon as he was cleared to go, he was back in the lineup, ready to go. And he played a lot of snaps. For a guy coming off injury, you'd like to see a little less snaps from him and take some of his playing time down from 60 to 70% to maybe 50%. And let him be in there in the situations we needed him to be there so he'd be fresh. And then you might have seen some of that production go up. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem's really clear. We have no depth. None. I mean, absolutely no one. Beyond the guy that I'm saying I feel is going to be a starter this year, Montravius Adams can play. He plays a nose tackle. He doesn't really play anywhere else. He's not a versatile piece that you're going to move in and out of three positions. But he is a guy who gives you good reps when he's in the game. I know this isn't going to happen, but I'm going to give my personal thoughts on this. I actually personally would be just fine if the starting lineup was Cam Hayward, Montravius Adams, Keanu Benton, and Larry Obi and the odd man out. For whatever reason, Larry Ogunjobi hasn't lived up to that contract, but when you see Montravius Adams on the field, he puts in good reps, and you see him make some splash plays every once in a while where he knifes through the backfield to stop a running play. He's not going to get you any sacks. He's not going to put on a ton of pressure. That's not his game. He's more of a run stuffer. He takes up blocks. He holds his ground well. He's been by far the best surprise that I had seen coming out of a dude we pick up off a practice squad somewhere in the last few years, for sure. I kind of like Montravius Adams, to be honest with you. I'm like, when they picked him up, I'm like, who the hell is this guy? But then you start to see him play. He plays with a really nice motor. And you're not going to see him be the focal point of the defense by any means, but you don't need him to be. If you remember back when the 3-4 worked at its best, Casey Hampton was not going to make a ton of splash plays. But he was going to eat up double teams, and he was going to take extra blockers on to allow the linebackers to move and do what they need to do on their end and flow free without trying to shed blockers constantly. And Montravius Adams isn't on that same level, but he does a lot of those same things. So that's why I personally like him. He's not going to fill up a stat sheet, but he does something and fills a very important role for this defense, I think. And I think that would allow Keanu Benton to play on a more impactful, in a more impactful way than what he's done so far, because he's not going to be in the middle fighting off double teams all the time. You're going to get him in a little bit more one-on-one type situations that Larry Ogunjobi is just not taking advantage of. So getting back to Cam Hayward, I think it's going to be a controversial take. I think Cam Hayward has a monster season. I think the team would be smart to get the extension done now. I think I've gone back and forth on price tag on him, and the more I've looked into it, it seems like kind of where he's at now at $16 million would be kind of the bargain price for Cam Hayward. If you add some guarantees onto it and make it 3 years, with maybe that third year being kind of a year where we have an opt-out on him without a huge cap hit, like a huge dead cap hit. If you're front-loading the contract the first 2 seasons, that might be the way to rework this thing to where Cam feels good about it. But we just saw last night, Calais Campbell, 38 years old, still getting contracts in the NFL. He was still productive last year. So all of you people saying, oh, well, you can't play, he's too old. Defensive line's a little bit of a different beast. You can play in your late 30s at that position if you play with power, and that's been Cam's game since day one. He's not been a big finesse guy. He's been a power guy. That's his game. I think he's going to have a monster season. I don't know if he's going to put 10.5 sacks back up on the board again like 2022. But I think it's reasonable to think he can get 8. With the emergence of Keanu Benton, if he's developing his pass rush skills and showing more of the flash that we saw in at times last season, with TJ and Alex going to be demanding attention, if you have a couple of linebackers who can really blitz now, and Patrick Queen, and I think Peyton Wilson's going to be on the field more than people think in passing situations. He showed he could blitz when he was at NC State. You get a couple of those type guys there, all of a sudden Cam Hayward kind of becomes the forgotten man, and he gets in one-on-one situations, and that's where that guy eats. You cannot leave him one-on-one with a guard in this league. He is still too powerful. He still has that snap off the ball where he gets into you. He kind of picks offensive linemen up, and I mean, that dude, he throws guys into the backfield at the quarterbacks. Even if he knows he can't get there, you'll see a lineman flying back at the quarterback because Cam Hayward is just that physical. Those are things that translate when you're older. He still can do those things, and that's why I think Cam Hayward is going to still have a big year. He's always been a good run defender. He's going to continue to be a good run defender. None of that's going to change. What I think changes this year is he gets back to getting the sacks, and I think he's going to have 8 is where I'm kind of putting his benchmark. If you believe in the secondary being better, you believe in that middle linebacker, specifically that group, being better, you're going to get more coverage sacks than we had last year. And that means Cam Hayward is also going to be a part of that coverage sack group. I'm telling you, I just there's going to be a little bias in this one because again, as I've told y'all, I'm a Buckeye. I've loved Cam Hayward since I've seen him as a freshman. But even taking the bias out of this and trying to think logically, the dude's a beast. I mean, we're talking in 2022, he was in conversations with being a top 3, top 5 interior defensive lineman. You really think 1 year made that much of a difference? I don't. Until he shows me that he's slowed down instead of an injury slowing him down, I'm not listening to any of this talk that's going on. Too many people were in the moment, and they don't take a step back and look at things in a logical way to determine what was the root cause of things. And I'll say this, Larry Ogunjobi has potential, and you see flashes from him, but he's on the injury report every single week, and he's not practicing every single week. And maybe it's not that he's not capable of being the player that can live up to the contract that he was paid. Maybe he's limited by injuries. But the difference where I'm going to talk about him versus Cam Hayward, Cam doesn't get hurt. He's missed, significant time twice in his career. Larry Ogunjobi is constantly hurt. I mean, just constantly hurt. So whether we want to call it his play on the field or whether we want to say his injuries are limiting his play on the field, he's never lived up to this contract. So when we look at this room moving forward, you're going to need at least, and I mean at least, one defensive lineman in next year's draft. They need to be a high pick. And depending on how things shake out the rest of this season and the quarterback situation, I'm talking first or second round. High pick. Because we don't have anything behind these guys. And Larry's not going to be here next year. I don't think it's any controversy to say Larry Ogunjobi will be gone. If Cam Hayward doesn't get an extension, there's a very, very good chance he's gone. Now, not only do you need one, but you need to replace 2 starters along that defensive line. And you still have no depth behind it. There's going to be a lot of reworking in this offseason coming for Omar Khan and that group. And I'm telling you what, that group's in trouble. He's going to have his work cut out for him. Yeah, you can bring guys in as free agents. We did that to some extent this year, but they're more role players. They're not guys that you are really going to look at to become a starter. I don't think a guy like Loudermilk is ever going to improve enough to be a starter. Could he be a Chris Wormley type guy where he's got a very specific role on this defense and he comes in to be a depth piece to fill that role and you feel comfortable with him in that role? I thought so before because of course these Wisconsin guys play the same defense in college and usually feel good about him coming in and filling that same role, but he has not shown he can do that. This is a make or break year for him. If he doesn't make it this year, there's a chance that they move on from him. DeMarvin Leal. This guy is going to be the talk of camp on that defensive line. He came in out of shape. He looked horrible all year. I mean, all year. He looked horrible. And I worry about a guy that cannot get motivated enough to get his body right to do his job in the NFL. I mean, you're privileged enough to be there. You weren't exactly a first or second round pick. There's no, nothing the team owes you. It doesn't cost them a lot to cut you. How are you not motivated to show up ready to go? Now, reports are coming out that he does look much better. I've heard 5 or 6 different people who are at these mini camps and OTAs talked about how much better he's looked physically. He does look like he's a lot more conditioned. We'll see. I've lost all faith in that dude. I just don't understand how motivation is an issue for you at this level. Everybody else is doing everything they can to get themselves ready each and every week, in season, off season. They're doing work. I just don't see how you show up to camp out of shape and expect to play. That worries me about him. He's talented. I mean, he's a talented guy, and I actually advocated for his behalf, on his behalf, I should say, his rookie year, because I mean they moved that guy all over the place. I'm like, a rookie is just learning the game, and we're playing this guy, and I think he moved to 7 or 8 different positions his rookie season. Like, what are we doing with this guy? There's versatile, and then there's insanity, and what we were doing with him was insanity. And I think it's stunted his growth. And maybe that's part of where his motivation was. Okay, coach, what do you want me to train for? I don't know how to train my body because you keep moving me to different positions. That has to be very difficult because these guys do have a very particular way that they train based on the positions that they play. And if the organization is not being upfront with him and just saying that, hey, listen, we tried to move you around a bit as a rookie to see where you fit best. You're better as a defensive lineman, kind of like what we thought you would be as the time we drafted you. I don't know if that conversation happened, but he clearly was not motivated. There must have been some level of frustration, or I don't know. But excuses are excuses. He still has to show up, and he still has to be ready to go. So he's got a lot to prove. I think he's going to be the guy this year that the cameras are going to be on. And if he can turn this thing around and become the guy that they drafted, it's going to save a lot of heartache for this organization when they do rebuild this defensive line. He could be the answer to replace Larry Ogunjobi if he gets his act together. But he's got a long way to go. So that's not something you're going to count on. So I think at minimum you're going to need 2 guys on the defensive line, and you probably want to try to get them through the draft. Now I know we drafted the kid from Iowa, Logan Lee, this year. He's a late draft pick. I think he was our 5th round pick. He was kind of a rotational piece at Iowa. He's undersized. He's got a lot of. I mean, his frame is from what everybody's talked about, the experts. His frame is there to add the weight and to bulk up, and to do it without affecting his speed and his agility and things that he's used to relying on. So there's some optimism with a guy like that, but he's definitely a developmental piece. I don't know that you're going to say, hey, your rookie year, you're going to spend this just trying to put on the weight and get in the gym and get your body right to be in the 3-4, and then we're comfortable starting you next season. You're not going to do that. Typically, a guy drafted that late is a depth piece anyway. Can they turn into a starter? Absolutely. Do you expect them to turn into a starter? Not a chance. You just hope for the best. They bring in a guy like Dean Lowry. He's a very seasoned vet. I actually watched him a good bit because my wife's a Packer fan. So I watched him a good bit when he was with Green Bay. And he shows some flashes at times of a guy who he's more of a I view him more of as a run specialist. He's good at stopping the run. He played in a 4-3 there, so he was more of a defensive tackle there. But he can fill the role of one of the, probably giving a break to either Cam or Larry Ogunjobi if we needed to. I don't think he's going to be off the first guy off the bench by any means. I think they're still going to rely on Loudermilk and hope the Marvin Leal comes along. But we'll see what happens with that. But he is a veteran. He's a guy who's experienced. He's proven. And if you don't get your young guys to develop the way that you want to, he can steal some minutes and steal some snaps from guys like Cam and Larry O. There's not a lot to like about this room, to be perfectly honest. I mean, Keanu Benton is obviously the ascending superstar. We all think he's the guy that looked a lot like Javon Hargraves his first year, and we think he can fill that role going into this year. He lost some weight, dropped about 10 pounds. Said he focused on trying to take care of his body and learn how to maximize how he does things with his body. So I thought it was quite intriguing to hear that he actually dropped some weight if he's going to play more of that nose tackle role. But if it makes him feel better and he feels more athletic and he's focusing more on a pass rush this year, then I can understand that. And I think everybody knows this guy's going to be good. So I don't see a situation looking at the current roster where you feel good about letting Cam Hayward walk after this season. I think the team has painted themselves on a corner where they have to sign him to an extension, if for nothing else, just to help rebuild the defensive line so you do have somebody to take over when he leaves. I mean, we can't rely on just going out and grabbing whatever free agent's available that fits our cap. We have to start building depth at some of these positions. And it's difficult because of the salary cap era. But my goodness, you can't do it on the defensive lines or the offensive lines like we've been doing. They have to extend Cam. I mean, I'm sorry to tell everybody who is against this. They have to. You have nobody else there that's going to do this. That they cannot play his position and fill his role. They can't fill half of his role right now based on what they've proven already. So I think you have to give an extension. You're going to hope and pray that either guys between Loudermilk or Liao decide to get it together and figure this thing out this year, or you're going to be hunting a lot of defensive linemen next year. So again, outside of Cam Hayward himself and outside of Keanu Benton, both getting a lot of attention, Cam because of the contract talks, Keanu because of course, he's the guy that everybody's expecting to be the rising superstar. There's not a lot of people talking about the issues at depth. And I wanted to touch on that because I just feel like for all of you talking about, Cam Hayward shouldn't get a contract extension, who are you playing? Who are you playing? And I don't want to hear, we'll get a free agent. The guys that are going to be free agents are not going to be Cam Hayward. Their teams are letting them walk either because they're way too expensive for their production or they're just not as good as he is. We have to extend him. And I expect them to extend him. It's going to be challenging, but it's going to get done. So, sorry to burst some bubbles on this Friday going into the weekend. But if you really don't agree with me, I really hope some people start to get some comments on this. I'd love to know your thoughts. And I always welcome opposition views because I like to learn and research things when somebody provides another point of view. So maybe you guys think something that I'm not thinking of right now, but as of right now, where I see things, this defensive line group's in a lot of trouble. So I'm going to cut this off and quit beating a dead horse here, but I appreciate everybody watching. I hope you can like and share if you enjoy the content. If there's something that I could be doing better, free to let me know. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Let's get this thing to Latrobe. I am so ready. Have a good one.